May the God of all wonder, who set the stars in the sky, bless you with relentless unsettledness that drives you to seek truth. May the God of all justice, who gave motion to the rivers, bless you with righteous anger that drives you to seek freedom for all. May the God of all love, who placed laughter in the kookaburra, bless you with the friendship that looks like the love where one lays down their life for another. May the God of all comfort, who determined the height of the mountains, bless you with tears from shared pain and mourning that shows you hope. Now, with wonder, righteous anger, sacrifice and lament, go in truth, justice, love and hope to change the heart of Australia. I'll hand over now to Mary Ring, who will introduce our guests who will speak to us.
So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We are honoured that you are here. My first brief introduction is to Christina Raymer, a cradle Catholic and first generation Kiwi, who's going to give us a very short synodal perspective from Aotearoa, New Zealand. She'll be followed by Kevin Liston doing the same from Australia. And then we have long-awaited third speaker, Elissa Roper, around whom this evening is kindly based. Christina, starting with you, you've been a terrific supporter of Root and Branch, which, given the time difference through to London, is no mean feat. We're so grateful to you. You've worked for 5 years as a volunteer in Papua New Guinea, 10 years as a director of Mahitahi, which is the New Zealand, or was the New Zealand Catholic Volunteer Agency, and you have a particular interest in New Zealand's place in the Pacific. You're a cradle Catholic and a first generation Kiwi, and you're kindly going to give us an overview. Your current focus is reform of the Catholic Church, particularly in regard to establishing gender equity in Catholic leadership and ministry. And I have to say, we loved your Pink Shoes into the Vatican initiative last October, so I'm rather hoping you may mention that. It's a very short introduction, but thank you so much, and over to you.
Kia ora tātou. Let's welcome all and hello everyone in the Māori language. I don't want to speak long because and we want to hear Elissa, and there's so much going on globally, but just to give you a little bit of perspective that we down under feel very connected to what's happening globally and inspired by what's happening globally. And that's, so I think it's the mantra that I've always had is to think globally and act locally. And it's via Zoom, which has been gifted to us through the COVID thing, where we discovered each other and discovered that there's such a huge reform movement out there, which is continuing to motivate us. And one of the group that I'm involved with, particularly in Aotearoa, New Zealand, is Be the Change, and we've been going 5 years. So, and it was inspired by the visit of a Catholic woman priest to New Zealand, where for most of us, it's like, wow, a real Catholic woman priest? How did you get to be that? And I mean, you've all heard that story before, I'm sure. But that's what inspired us to simply be the change, be the church we want to be, that's open, inclusive, and welcoming of all. And since then, we've gone on to think, well, okay, what is the nature of this church that we want? What are the key issues that we really should be working with? And it's not so much trying to save the old institution of some relic of the past, which, well, for our children and so many others is finding increasingly irrelevant. It's actually getting back on mission. And what is our mission? For us as a country of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I think it resonates globally, number one is decolonisation, undoing the knots and abuses that were created over 200 years of colonial history and embracing our tangata whenua, our First Nations peoples, and the extraordinary gifts that they bring to us in terms of their spirituality, their connection, their view of the world, their way of being. We have so much to learn from them. So that process of decolonization and being a part of a Māori Renaissance is an extraordinary challenge, but also gift to us. So that's one key thing. A second one is care of the earth and dealing with climate change and the global catastrophe that we all are facing. How do we live sustainably on this planet? And once again, there are many ways in which we can approach this, and I won't go into that, but that's a key focus. And becoming a global community. How do we become more inclusive, recognise our diversity that there is, embrace that diversity, and be welcoming, find a place for all. So those are our key focuses. How the Church in New Zealand is embracing this synodal journey. I've just went quickly onto the website. Auckland Diocese is well onto it. We have a wonderful Bishop, Steve Lowe. There is a program of meetings that have been scheduled for this coming year. And so they're embracing that whole process and what the challenges are for us as church. Hamilton Diocese, absolutely nothing is happening. And I think, but we've just got a new bishop, so maybe that'll change. And I think, like in most places, it's a mixed bag. It's very varied. Some places are really embracing it and others don't want to know anything about it and it's all going to go away. So that's all I'm going to say at this stage. These pink shoes was a wonderful thing. I don't know where it's going to lead us next, but yes, we will go where the Spirit leads. That's us. Thank you.
Christina, that's just wonderful. And talking of the global community, how lovely of you, how wonderful that you're here and that we're sharing this. Thank you. Kevin, I'm moving on very swiftly because I know we've slipped on a little bit of time. So if I can just tell people, Kevin, that you co-chair the Australian Catholic Coalition for Church Reform. There can be few people, I'm guessing, who would be better placed to feel the pulse of the emerging church in Australia. I loved it when I went onto your website, kevinliston.net, Catholicism in the 21st Century. And it says, live like you've never lived before. And I thought, I've not heard that in the church before. Powerful. That's good. I like it. In Root and Branch, we've counted Kevin as a long-time friend, just like Christina, since our earliest meetings. It takes some commitment to attend our evening meetings for us, all sorts of hours for you friends. And we've always welcomed your thoughtful and deeply loving comments, Kevin. I am blown away when I read your talk, and I'm hoping all our fellow listeners here will be too. Thank you, Kevin. Over to you.
Thank you, Mary. I would just like to make a few comments on clericalism. Clericalism seems to be built into the structures of Catholicism. I didn't realize just how different the lifestyle of a priest is from that of most Catholics until I left it. As a priest in the 1970s, I didn't have to worry about having a job or income, a house to live in, security for the future, including retirement, health insurance, or status in the community. No one depended on me for their lives and well-being. If I died, my family and friends would be sad and would grieve for a time, but no one's life would be seriously disrupted. Once ordained, I had a ready-made platform and audience. Community relevance was a given. I had masks, I collar investments, that gave me and others a sense that I was special, and I performed a ritual that no one, including me, fully understood. At the age of 27, I was deemed an authority on morality and how people should live their lives and conduct their sexual relationships, things I had neither experience, appreciation, nor understanding of. When I left the priestly ministry, I had to find a job and secure an income without any career qualifications. Being in a strange city, I had no connections or contacts. I had to find and pay for a place to stay, renting initially until I could buy a cheap flat in a rundown area with the help of a loan from my brother. I bought the cheapest car I could find. I was on my own, with neither status nor safety net. Getting married made me responsible for another person in my life. Then we had a child. I felt excited, privileged, and with more responsibility. If I died then, 2 other lives would be deeply changed forever. My experience of both lifestyles has made me uncomfortably aware of how self-concepts develop and easily solidify into habits and expectations. Much has changed since the 1970s, but not enough. Hopefully, as we grow in synodal ways, we will learn to relate as adults. But until we eliminate clericalism and laicism, all of us will be less than we could be. Thank you.
Wow. Amazing words. Thank you so much, Kevin, for giving us that context. And thank you deeply also, Christina. And thank you both also for responding at such short notice to come up with those wonderful contexts for us. Elissa, we're so grateful to you for bringing us together. Dr. Elissa Roper is an Australian theologian specialising in ecclesiology and synodality. She has a passion for renewing the Catholic Church's understanding of the people of God. She's worked with the drafting committee of the Great Australian Plenary Council, which was drawing to a close, I think I'm right in saying, as Pope Francis announced his worldwide synod. And she's a theological advisor to the Assembly of the Federation of Catholic Bishops' Conferences of Oceania. So her theological journey began when she was called to baptism in the Catholic Church, aged 22, and having been enriched and guided by the RCIA programme, she had a thirst for more, and so she commenced the Bachelor of Theology degree before she was even baptised. Her vocational call to be a theologian was so strong that despite being advised, as it surely was back then, it was a dead-end path for a layperson, she committed to a higher degree for research. Some commitment. 20 years later, she has her doctorate, 4 children, she says an enormous student debt, and thankfully a job. Elissa works for the Sisters of Mercy in Papua New Guinea, where she and the Solomon Islands, where she manages a programme of theology offering tertiary theological education to women. So we in Root and Branch would like to offer you an enormous thanks, Elissa. You're following up on 2 powerful talks that you made for our companion organisation, Spirit Unbounded, last October, and you generously offered us more time, which we grabbed with both hands. We here in the UK have been deeply impressed, much as Christina, by the things that Christina has outlined for us. Care for creation that we see coming out of Australasia. Openness to First Nation people's wisdom. Sorrow for wounds. But overall, what impresses us seems to be the growing numbers of empowered and empowering laity amongst you. And we feel honoured here in the UK and in the West to be amongst you today. So thank you, Elissa. Over to you.
Thank you, Mary, for that very warm welcome. Thank you to yourself and to the other Mary Varley, who I've been in contact with. Such lovely hospitality, and thank you to all of you for your generous attention and participation today. I love how some keywords that I'm going to cover are already popping up. So the idea of hospitality, diversity, responsibility, and friendship. Now, to all of you today, I invite you to have a pen and paper with you just to pop down any insights that might pop up any questions, just a word or two as we go on. You don't need to write down any notes because I'll make these slides available to the organisers. So I'd like to acknowledge the First Nations people, the Wurundjeri clan, members of the Kulin Nation, on whose beautiful land I live and work. It's a beautiful Yarra Valley here just out of Melbourne. I acknowledge that, as Kevin and Christina have mentioned, that there is much to be learnt from each other, especially our First Nations people. The gift that they offer in terms of looking after our environment, of respecting relationships, and of an enduring hope and patience. And thankfully, they keep extending their hands in welcome. So may we respond. Thank you, Jacinta, for the blessing that you gave us. That's really special to be blessed at the beginning. The path of synodality is being revealed through a great desire of faithful Catholics for change. I've observed how it's been the renewal groups that have mobilised our time, energy and resources in response to the signs of the times. The papacy of Francis, the revelations of abuse and clericalism, and a time of global pandemic are heralds of an era of urgency, an era of emergency for our beautiful planet. We must do something, many things, and we must do them together. So we know that now is the time to be the church that God wants us to be the church that our earth needs us to be. So what does that look like? What are we to do? Fully aware of our wounds and our shortcomings, how can we as church be responsible for our common home, loving, inclusive, and faithful to Jesus? What is God's Spirit calling me and us to do? Now, this is exactly the place that we need to be. Always, don't ever stop searching these questions. And this is the question we were asked in the preparation phase of the Australian Plenary Council. It was a wonderful gift that really stirred people up. So today I want to share with you the foundations for being a synodal church. Foundations establish in our own mind who we are as thinking and acting human beings and as community. They give us the how for the journey so that the what can be revealed by God as we journey together. So it's a big topic and we're going to make the best of our time together. This was never intended to be a lecture, so thank you for being so generous opening up your conversation. So I'm going to speak as plain as possible so that we can connect and we can spark further conversations and thoughts. And my hope for you is this will keep you awake tonight and tomorrow and grasp your heart and mind as it has mine, proving to be a genuine and fruitful way forward as a disciple of Jesus and as a thinking, doing and loving human being. So let's get started by observing, what do you want other people to be? I want people to listen. I want others to speak up, to be seen. I have a little brief story. When I worked, I used to work in Australia Post when I was a university student to help pay the way, and it never ceased to astound me how little the management paid attention to the people on the floor. So there you were doing all of the work, handling all the mail, and potentially being in some hazardous environments, and yet those people who were promoted from being a simple mail officer to a very important senior mail officer seemed to have forgotten what they were speaking of as the average person on the floor. And it's something that I keep coming back to. Why do managers lose that skill of being attentive to what's happening around them, to what the voices of other people are saying? If only they took seriously the attitude of being attentive. So I'm trying to provoke with you some of these little stories. What examples can you think of where you just wish people would listen and be willing to listen to other people's voices? Today we have an overabundance of data. We can't and shouldn't stop hearing and reading all sorts of things, but we can and should be aware of the authority that we give to sources of information. Who do we respect and allow to inform our understanding? For example, my children often flick their fingers on their phone and come up with a definition or some information that they were seeking. And I will always respond, but who is telling you that this is the case? And their answer is Google. So I insist that they look at the list of results, just put in a little bit more effort and question the source of the data. I challenge them to be active with the data that they're exposed to, so that ultimately they will become thoughtful citizens of society and not just passive consumers. I consider this to be training them in the habit and thus developing a virtue of being intelligent. Thus, we avoid the risk of being narrow, rigid, and ignorant. Essential to being intelligent about what we allow in our minds and hearts is being attentive to what we're not exposed to. Am I only hearing about the issues around being a gay or trans person, or about climate change, or about racism or sexism, only from popular opinion, and not from the people who are directly involved? Do I not really want to know? Do I feel uncomfortable? Why? These are great questions, and there's an almost infinite number because we always have the capacity to deepen our minds and hearts. Being intelligent, thankfully, is not restricted to just the super bright. We all do this. And the extent to which we do it well is not related to our IQ. The key is to ask questions and to be open to listening to stories. Now let's jump to where the rubber really hits the road. Why can't they, you, me, just be reasonable? I found this, I have to admit it's from Twitter, so I don't know if it's real, but it's quite amusing. Being reasonable is so often a big fat failure when we observe how what we've just covered, that is being attentive and being intelligent, is not in play. Being attentive and intelligent through listening to our work colleagues, being open to advice and new ideas, and appreciating the importance of past, present and future in our plans is critical to being a reasonable person. The big risks at this point are our human tendency to prefer, one, putting up the walls in defence, having that bunker mentality where we plant our feet and refuse to budge. And two, a culture of maintenance where, in the words of Pope Francis, we obsess with treasures, buildings, titles and clothing, and even the liturgy itself. And he says, tradition is the life of those who have gone before us and who go on. Traditionalism is their dead memory. Sorry, I'll read that again because I was going to put it on my slide and I forgot. So Pope Francis says, tradition is the life of those who have gone before us and who go on. Traditionalism is their dead memory. Now, we know this is not restricted merely to the Catholic Church. Put simply, people often choose to value doing what has always been done this way, and in doing so reject being attentive, intelligent, and reasonable about the world around them. Thus, the enemy of being reasonable is so often simple inertia, being comfortable, being self-contained, neglecting our reality of living in a web of relationships. And fear sits here too, particularly the fear of losing what we've gained with great cost, or what we think we deserve. It's a form of pride where a person assumes they have the answers before the meeting even starts, and that their interpretation of reality is the truth. To force this upon others is to injure their consciences. It can become abusive. We hear this very regularly. I want people to stop being judgmental. Now, being judgmental is different to judging, because we judge all the time. All of our being attentive, intelligent, and reasonable is what prepares us to judge, and to judge well. Whether we should take an umbrella out with us today, if I'll meet that deadline at work, if that person is trustworthy. These are all judgments we make all the time. And what we're aiming for is a judgment that is wise and compassionate, to develop a capacity to reflect and to act as Jesus did in the Gospels, to be responsible. Now, my little story here comes from Papua New Guinea. When I visited a small town that was very isolated, I was privileged to speak with a missionary priest about that diocese, its people and its projects. He described the massive environmental destruction being caused by mining companies who poison the great rivers that bring life to the land and people. And he explained how schools in a particular area couldn't find teachers, so the students were sent away. They couldn't finish year 12. The good priest was distraught. He said, with tears in his eyes, "But who cares? We make a dire but common mistake if we think that being responsible, having wise and just judgments, is achieved, in biblical terms, through the law. As if following the rules, ticking the boxes, replicating what worked in the past, and meeting arbitrary cultural expectations are the pathway. As if management roles, ordination, or any special titles can instantly produce legitimate and authentic authority." And didn't we hear that from Kevin, who said he was an expert, expected to be an expert on morals at age 26? These 3 words have had a huge impact on me. But who cares? It has impressed upon me that the most basic and obvious response of a faithful Christian to the pain around us is, I care. We can then ask, what does being responsible mean in this situation? I encourage you to try it yourselves as individuals, but it's also valuable to do as a group. What does being responsible mean in this situation? What does it look like? What is possible? Let's be reasonable about it. What have I heard? And what further data can I seek? Being authentic. This structure describes how we operate, how we are made as thinking, doing, and loving human beings. When we tune into our cognitive processes, that which leads us to do and to love, and to not do and to not love, then we can intentionally develop a more authentic self. If you ask, how can I be my best self? This is what it looks like. We can work on observing ourselves being attentive, etc., or missing the mark. It's a process we can practice and grow into, and we can recognise that we never achieve perfection. But we must always attend to each stage. We can't skip all this hard work and achieve wisdom and compassion without conversion. I find it invaluable to ask myself, is what I'm asking of my colleagues or my family reasonable? Am I being responsible? And what do I think that looks like in this situation. So many times through my studies, and then I go back to my parish life, and I really haven't had the example of what a theologian looks like in a parish. And I haven't had the example of what a lay theologian looks like, you know, attending to the issues of our world. So I used to ask myself, what would a theologian do? So I had to be, there's creativity and there's imagination in there, which is a really good thing. So we can't love with the compassion that Jesus did without listening and seeing and touching the people around us, just as he did. So the gospel stories reveal how even Jesus was stretched when he met and conversed with other people, such as that woman who challenged him to give her the scraps from the table. We can read these stories and see how Jesus perfected this process of being authentic. Peak authenticity is therefore not raw power or lording it over others, but self-sacrifice unto death. And so finally, to being loving or friendly. And this is what we want to be. Being in love with each other, all creation and our Creator. And I find it really helpful when clever people like Kathleen Williams, a Sister of Mercy and theologian, explain that being in love, what does that look like? It's being friendly. Therefore, being friendly with each other, with all creation and with our Creator. Jesus tells us, his disciples, to join him in friendship, to join him in being fully alive, mature and authentic. So he says, I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant doesn't know what the master is doing, but I have called you friends, because I've made known to you everything I've learnt from my Father. So with this light, we ask again, what is synodality? Is it doing this process well? Is it being authentic? And the answer is a commitment to conversion, without which we cannot develop authenticity. Now, obviously, there's a lot of depth to this, but if you think of that process we've described and how hard it can be, how there will be gradual improvement in yourself, but you'll also find times of great distress. And that's the path of conversion. So synodality is asking us to do this, just as we have that message throughout the entire scriptures. It's asking us to do that today, to commit to it today, to attend to the signs of the times today. So let's look at what that means and some of the guiding words and ideas behind that. So the word synod itself is journeying or walking together. So we're not walking together in some sort of conformity where we all look the same and we do the same. We're walking together in diversity. So here's the hard work, is to become friends and be able to do that together and have some agreement on our values, on our tradition and what we want for the future. That frequent call within scripture, if today you hear God's voice, harden not your hearts. It's the preparation for conversion, which is God's work. Having that soft heart, having that vulnerability to God's work. So the risk is to harden your hearts, which is some sort of being very much an individual that doesn't rely on God's guidance in life. And that fear, that inertia, all of those contribute to us putting something up that hardens our hearts. So we need open minds and open hearts. I'm quite caught by the words, "Be holy, for I, your God, am holy." Occurs a number of times in scriptures. If we're made to be this way, in some way going through this process of self-awareness and developing our cognitive processes, in some ways that is being holy because God made us this way. And I recommend to you Pope Francis' document that's very much overlooked, Gaudete et Exsultate, on holiness in today's world, very much about being an authentic person. Very easy to read, and something that I really appreciated the Pope being able to write. I have a little bit further to cover as we move on to looking at communities. I'm not going to go into too much depth, but I thought you might like just a little break here, just the opportunity to sit quietly. If you've got some of those words that have risen up, just take a moment to write just a little or to sit quietly, and we'll come back in a couple of minutes. Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll come back together. We are going to have just one more brief section, and then the opportunity to talk together in small groups. So my second section is about communion. So we've looked at ourselves, and now we're going to ask, what does communion mean? And what does it mean to you? Well, communion has the same Latin root as the words community and communal. Therefore, when we examine the question, how do we foster a communion of communions, it's useful and reasonable to use the foundational language of community. So we want to build a culture that commits to authenticity, that process we've been talking about, and not necessarily achieving it all the time, but we are committed to ongoing renewal and processes that promote renewal and that promote friendship. This is not secondary to our mission. And this is almost one big statement I'd like to get across to the beautiful people in my own parish who do hospitality so well, who are so welcoming that that if you walked in as a stranger, you would feel very welcome amongst these lovely people. This is really important. It's central to evangelization. It's an internal task as church. We should be welcoming and hospitable to each other, but it's also that external going out and welcoming and being friendly to others. Now, processes can only be authentic and synodal to the extent that the people involved are open to being authentic and synodal. Now, even just a little bit, as we saw at the Synod on Synodality last October, simply being open to listening to the person next to you is a hugely important step. You may not be very far down that path of conversion that others might be on a particular topic. You look at any of the topics that were discussed at the Australian Plenary Council, and there was wildly diverging stages of conversion, we would say, on each topic, from people who thought it was completely unimportant to those who are extremely committed to sharing and communicating about that topic. So how do we bring it together? And this is, if you watch Pope Francis carefully, this is the very difficult task he is trying to manage from the top, that really is only really going to get traction if we're doing it at the bottom as well. So I've got some examples here that that are emerging as part of the authentic and synodal processes that are happening at the moment. I didn't put ecumenism, which is a bit sad. It's sort of been cut off a little in my diocese, but it's absolutely essential to commit to dialogue. And the ecumenical history since after the Second World War is a real testament to that and really important to synodality. So for Pope Francis, he has this little process of being synodal. He talks about hospitality, he talks about encounter, and he talks about dialogue. What comes first is not dialogue, because that's going to fail if you're not welcoming the person who's sitting next to you. If your heart is not welcoming and open to at least meeting them. If your mind is not open to at least hearing and allowing that, what they say, to settle inside you. So encounter is when hospitality really works, and dialogue is the actual fruit of that process. So with the Synod on synodality, we know their themes very early on that were identified from our feedback to the Secretariat is participation, communion, and mission. If you look at those three, how could we do any of those without being attentive, without being intelligent, reasonable, and responsible? In fact, you could say if we are to be responsible, we must have the participation of all members of our church. Communion is when we have achieved that friendship that sits above all that we're doing, that gives us a compassionate heart. And mission is where we go out and share all of this with the world. I'd like to point to, if you want something really practical, actual process you can follow, the Mercy International Reflection Process. They have some really great resources there. If you simply search for it on the internet, you can find colourful posters and reports and a great website. So that's about coming together as a group, reflecting on some issues around you, and then working out how to do something about it. And it's a 4-stage process that goes around in a circle. So really helpful to renewal groups. And then, of course, it's what are we all about as Catholic Church? Because a lot of this, what we're talking about is simply being responsible and friendly and compassionate human beings. But we are enlightened by and inspired by the thought that we are sacramental people. We are baptismal. It gives us an authority in Jesus' name to do as he did. We are confirmed in the Holy Spirit. We are to heal. So where this healing is needed, it's us as Catholic Church that should be leading the way, forgiving and reconciling, committing in service to communion, and being a Eucharistic people, thanksgiving, joy, and inclusion. We've covered a lot. So I'm going to invite you. I think Mary's going to jump back in, but I have some leading questions for our small group discussions. And of course, these are things that you can take away and do yourself or to follow up with your groups. Thank you very much for your attention.
Elissa, I'm just blown away. I feel like I've been a Catholic for 7 decades, and that's the teaching that I've waited to hear. And I haven't heard it until now. I think that was an amazing outline. Go ahead.
How can synodality help us to be more intimate with each other and more intimate with God?
Not in any way an expert in prayer, so obviously that's really important to spend time being generous in your relationships. The word intimate to me sounds like we want to be closer to each other. And, you know, if you read the Acts of the Apostles, you just sort of think, oh, I really wish we could be so intimate with each other to have such a close friendship. That's what we're after. So for me personally, it really is this process of being attentive to other people. I love that Pope Francis talks about hospitality as sort of being the stepping stone. And in our breakup out group, you know, I think the concept of friendship has really resonated because we know when it's not there. We know when we walk into a parish and we're not welcomed, you know, that there hasn't been the thought put into how valuable hospitality is. So I would always point back to just simply being welcomed, paying attention to who walks into your circle, whether you're sitting in a pew or whether you're at work. It's anywhere. It's just the human circles of relationships. I'll pass on to other people because the word intimate, I think that's really it's a beautiful word to use. Thank you.
Yep, I think that is a fascinating word. For me, synodality is summed up by saying we're all in this together. We're all part of this one thing, and anybody who has, I see quite a few people through Vinny's, and seeing people across the table talking about their lives, it becomes not just their lives, it's my life as well. And that's where the intimacy comes in. That sense of getting to know people, and I can't help them unless I know them. That takes time.
That's two beautiful ways. Christina.
I think this is one of the challenges of finding ways of actually having opportunity to talk to the people that you meet in your parish communities, if you still go to church and so on. That it's, if you're there, you just turn up for to rattle off a ritual and then walk out again without talking to anybody. You're not going to build that intimacy and connection, and you're not going to get to know people. You're just going to look at the backs of all these people in front of you in the pews and wonder about, well, who are they and where are they from? And in our parish, there's been a huge demographic change. This is the Cathedral of Hamilton in Aotearoa, New Zealand. They used to be mostly my demographic, white middle class and so on. Now they're mostly Indian and Filipino. That's the only reasons that our numbers are still there. That our demographic, they're all over 60 and aging, and not and our children and grandchildren are not there. And so the question is, who are they? And rather than seeing them as a problem, I see them as, this is our new community. I want to know them. I want an opportunity to be able to talk to them and engage with them and connect and see their perspective on the world, where they've come to, being church, who they are, what their challenges are as migrants to our communities. There's so many questions and there's so much enrichment to come from that. And but you know, how do we do that in our community? How do we actually become much more a listening community? That's our challenge, and there's no one solution. Everyone need to find ways of doing that, but we just have to do it.
Thank you so much. That's really wonderful. I'm going to move us on because I see we have 3 people waiting. John Glynn, will you like to give your question?
Okay, there we are. Yes, hello everybody. Thanks, Elissa. That was really great. In fact, Christine and Kevin, I was really moved with all you said. Look, Elissa, you're equating love with friendship. Oh my goodness! Talk about a bullseye. That's absolutely on the mark. The whole problem is that the wonderful church that we're all hoping to become has a huge barrier preventing this, and that's clericalism. It's absolutely there, a huge wall standing between the people and the church. Here in Port Moresby, as you all know, just over a week ago, we had these riots and dreadful things happening. And I've been hearing all the stories from my friends and the people I work with in the settlements about how it affected them. And there hasn't been a word, not one peep out of any of our church leaders. There hasn't been a word of reassurance or concern from our Cardinal Archbishop, or from anyone in the church, or from the Catholic Bishops' Conference. Nothing. So clericalism is an enormous barrier to the church that we all want to become. So my question is, how do we do this? How do we become friends with our priests and bishops? You know, how do we become friends with them? That's my question.
We'll start with Elissa, but Kevin and Christina may well want to add in.
Thank you, John. Thank you. And I've been thinking about our little conversation we've met via email just recently, and for me, what I've observed, and I've been looking really closely, whether it's in a parish or the diocesan level or wider and all across the world, who is not involved in this process, who doesn't want to be involved in the Synod on Synodality, and there's so very few priests. We are not hearing that they're, where is their enthusiasm? And I'm really saddened. But I think this is a consequence of where we've put ourselves as church. I think, I'm hearing that our priests are terribly overburdened. We talk about responsibilities, but I'm generalizing, but we tend to fall in a parish into putting all those responsibilities onto our priest. And this is a terrible burden for them. And they don't have the support of genuine friendships, a large number anyway, with their parishioners. And that makes me really sad. And I think it's a symptom or maybe a cause of some of these symptoms. So I feel like the next step in synodality is for our priests. I really want our priests to start telling us what their problems are, what would help them, what they're worried about. This would require a great deal of vulnerability, and we don't train our priests to be vulnerable. So there's a real risk in there, but I think they need a forum where they feel safe and can start to express this so that people can really understand what can we do about this, how can we support them, because I'm here. Just heard recently a priest who's just fleeing from a diocese simply because of the way he's been treated from all levels, and it's not good enough. We need to have these conversations, and I think we can't move forward until we've done that.
Thank you, Elissa. Kevin or Christina, any thoughts?
I think that Elissa has summed it up extremely well in terms of what we put on our priests in a whole lot of ways. It's for us to reach out, and what Elissa has said throughout her talk about being authentic, about being attentive, about listening. It's about relating to other people, being ourselves, in terms of it's for us to reach out. For me, it's not put it onto somebody else like the priest to actually conduct make the community. It's for me to do it, make my community, to just talk to people. We almost make the priest a surrogate for a lot of the things that we should be doing as responsible individuals ourselves, where we should be, what's the word for it? Critical thinkers in relation to the kind of structure that Elissa talked about. Be attentive, be intelligent, be reasonable, be responsible, and be loving.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm so conscious of the time. We only literally have 2 or 3 minutes left. So Will you forgive me, John? Thank you so much. Can I move on to Hilary's question, and then we'll hope to squeeze in Patricia as well. Hilary, on with your question. You're muted, you're muted. Patricia, unmute yourself as well in readiness.
Thank you. In our group, we began to touch on the idea of ecumenism and the fact that maybe we were growing into a stage where denominations were really, frankly, irrelevant. And I think, you know, our experience has been that what is life-giving has been from the wider church. And the suggestions that we take responsibility for being attentive, being responsible, etc. What do you do when you're forbidden by the priest, who actually will tantamount throw you out if you dare to step past what he feels are acceptable boundaries? And I think it's that if we could move into having a much freer and broader sense of what being church is, that we're all Christians together, and that we don't, yes, there are certain differences between us liturgically, etc., and I acknowledge those, but the thing that the sort of issues that you've raised tonight as being important to synodality are for everyone. They're not tied to a liturgical rule. They're not tied, they're certainly not tied to clericalism. So, you know, I feel that that's a dimension that we shouldn't lose. We should hang in there.
Thank you, Hilary. Elissa, does that resonate with you?
You're talking about identity as church, and that's my my favourite topic. You've covered a lot there, Hilary. Ecumenism is going through a new stage at the moment called receptive ecumenism, where we recognise we can learn from other denominations, from other Christians. We can receive as well as give, and that's friendship. So that's hugely important to the process of synodality. But I would say, don't let go of your tradition and what you value as a particular denomination of Christians. You know, that gives us our identity. It's important. So don't let go. And we have to live in what we call a liminal space. We're on the edges, but it's worth it. And that's where the action is. That's where this whole stirring us up and converting us and following the Spirit's leadership. That's the space that we do it. Just don't let go of your connection with the rest of us. Yeah.
Well, very briefly, Christina, stirring any thoughts with you?
Yes, I think that we really do need to move ahead and do what we need to do, be the change we want to, form these communities, and perhaps there is some training needed. How do we do this? And there's a wonderful opportunity. I'm just about to put the link up in the chat. CLC, which is Christian Life Community. It's an Ignatian-based community that has a 500-year-old history. That's US-based. There's a person there who's created this opportunity of training. It's the first event to introduce us to it is on the 30th of January in 8 p.m. on Eastern Standard Time. It's a virtual synod conversation event, and then from there you can go forward and be trained about how to do this. I think it's a wonderful opportunity of once again, Spirit Unbounded. It's stuff that's coming from the grassroots that's really well founded with people who have the theology, the experience, the knowledge, and the skills to be able to do this. And so I encourage you to do it. I'll put the link there, and
you'll put the link in the chat.
Yes,
brilliant.
It's one way.
Thank you,
so
Christina.
It's one thing we can do.
Coming in last of all, thank you so much, Hilary, both of you. And Patricia, we're going to squeeze you in. If we run a few minutes over, it's worth it to hear you.
No, Mary, you'll be glad to hear that everything that Kevin has said, I was going to say, and everything that Christina and Elissa has said. I want to thank all three of you. That's what I was going to say as well. Just do it. Just be it. Just make a start. Just go and do it. And the word we came up with in our group was compassion, for authenticity, that we have to be compassionate and aware. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. I think that says it all.
Kevin took my script, you know.
Sorry, Patricia.
I'll throw the floor very quickly. Any last one question? I see no hands raised. If I could just say, Elissa, your words on being attentive and listening were just so key to me, because I sit there in church being addressed as brother. And so, brothers, we say this to you, and brothers, we say that to you. And Jesus said to the men, and you're just sitting there thinking, no, you are not being attentive. You are not listening. And I think we just have to go where we find that listening and that friendship and that love and the small communities that foster it. Forgive me, I shouldn't have broken in with that, but I think everybody here joins me in thanking you with the warmest possible appreciation for your time and for your incredible thoughts. I don't know if anybody can unmute for a clap, and then we'll hand over to Mary Varley. But I would like to say thank you so very much indeed. Mary Varley, you have a few closing words for us, and we'll let these good folk go for their day.
Okay. Elissa, thank you so much. You've given us a really solid foundation, and we're going to go on over the next year to explore different facets of an emerging church. And I'd want to say a huge thank you to Christine and to Kevin for sharing your thoughts with us. It's been a superb evening. I think I'm beyond delighted that so many of our friends from down under are here. People here have taken risks. In Australia and New Zealand, you seem to tell it as it is, and you light the way forward for many of us. We take heart from what's happening in Australia and New Zealand. So please, everybody who's here from down under, please see this evening as a mark of our respect and our friendship. And we hope to meet with you again before too long. A huge thank you too to everybody here tonight. Mary, this chat is so rich. We really must start to share some of the thinking that's going on in the chat that I think Elissa is already building on the foundations that you presented. So thank you, everybody else. We've had a very exhausting 2023, but we're back in 2024 in our root and branch community, and we're doing some really solid thinking about what might come next, and we hope to be in contact with everybody soon. But don't let that stop you writing to us and telling us what you think collectively as our root and branch community we should be doing. We'd be delighted to hear from anybody and everybody. So finally, please don't think I'm like the priest in church, but I want to talk a little bit about money. Yeah. I want to say huge thanks to everybody who gave so generously to Root and Branch in Spirit Unbounded last year. It could not have happened without those donations. Now, We're all volunteers, we're working from home, so every penny we spend is spent on Root and Branch and bringing incredible talks like this. We need to maintain the website, mail out, etc., etc. I'm sure you understand. So if you do want to make a donation, it's really quite easy. You'll see the donate button, as Peter's just showed us, at the top of the web page. Just click and take it from there. It might be that some of you want to make a regular donation rather than just through GoFundMe. If you do, just drop us an email and we'd be delighted to share our bank account details with you. So, after an amazing evening, I think all that's left now is for me to hand over to Sue, who's going to share a prayer and a blessing with us.
So we come to end of time this evening with deep gratitude for the many blessings we're given through one another. Loving Spirit, pour out your blessings on Elissa, Christina, and Kevin. Guide their inspiring and important work to create your kingdom. Open our hearts and minds to listen, learn, love, collaborate, renew, teach and enrich and be enriched. Show us the way forward as priests, prophets, and kings, as Christ's sisters and brothers. Show us how to become an emerging church, which is safe, just, and inclusive. Thank you. And I think we have a prayer from, right. This is a Karakia blessing, which is Maori incantation used to invoke spiritual guidance and protection. May the sun bring you energy by day. May the moon softly restore you by night. May the rain wash away your worries. May the wind blow strength into your being. May you walk on this earth in peace all the days of your life. I know its beauty forever and ever. Amen. And thank you for joining us from all over the world. It's been a great honor. Thank you.